right. Hello. Welcome to the live stream. Talk about bugs. I'm Eric Keller. And give you a couple seconds here to get started. We're going to continue working on the Longhorn Beetle. It's a hippie. Longhorn Beetle that I've been working on the past few weeks. And yeah, so that's what we're doing. I got my reference going. And feel free to ask me questions, as always. So last time I kind of stopped on this part, which I believe is the mesothorax right here. So we worked on the head for a bit last time. And as you can see, that's when I haven't really gotten into the fine detail yet, but just added some sort of secondary sculptural detail. You know, starting to look a little bit more organic. So that's where I'm going to start with this piece tonight. And let's turn on the old solo, get the stylus going, and take a look at our wonderfully disgusting reference imagery. All these cool little details and stuff. So again, these are pictures that I took in my own light box of a dead longhorn beetle. So that's why it's so gross. I always say it's a good idea, if you can, to use live images of live insects whenever possible. I have a few that I've gotten from online, so you can kind of see the difference. They're not quite as disgusting. They're just slightly disgusting. Now, I think insects are beautiful. I don't think they're disgusting at all, but you can see they're not as deteriorated. I can't tell if this one's alive or not, but this one's definitely a live image. But at the same time, reference is reference, so whatever you can get is good. Just kind of taking a look here, and some of the detail I'll eventually be sculpting. I love this kind of stuff. It's pretty cool. Okay, so let's continue with this. You can see these guys are kind of, and I did do a Z remesh last time, so this one has been quickly retopologized. I'm gonna make these things a bit thinner here because I like how spiky and menacing they look. I'm gonna go down to a lower subdivision level, get my move brush going. That's not the move brush. That's not the move brush. So I just came back from the gym, so my brain is a little bit tired here, but I'll perk up just as soon as the beer kicks in. And pull this out, make it a little bit longer and a little bit thinner with the smooth brush, and get that bend in there. That's a little bit better. I'm going to lower my Z intensity, my move brush. I kind of like to work with low intensity, so the changes aren't so abrupt. Something like that. And then I'm using the SK brushes. These are Sukaki's brushes. And he does a live stream as well. I mentioned before, I really like his brushes, especially this SK cloth brush. Oops. Alright, I lost my model. What happened here? Okay, all kinds of funky things are happening. Try that again. Kind of getting some nice organic kind of quality in here, a little bit of secondary detail. This is the coax, which is the first leg segment of the typical insect leg. I'm kind of taking a look at how the light falls on here to get an idea of the shape. And of course I'm trying to imagine what it looks like without the fur on there, which is always a little bit of a challenge, especially with the hairier bugs. Look, this actually looks like it curves inward into this groove here. Turn my mask by polygroups all the way up so that I can, this is all one subtool, but I have it set up in polygroups, and I have my mask by polygroups buttons probably right below my image here, but I have it on the bottom of the screen. Yeah, unfortunately it's right below my little video of myself here. Let me see, I can do this. There you go. If I turn it off, you can see it right here. Mask by polygroup. Normally that's found in brush, auto masking, mask by polygroup. So I just put it down here in my interface because I find it to be really useful. Useful setting. looks like I need a little bit more volume down here. And I'm going to pull this up a little bit so we get more of an arc. Let's see. Something like that. I'm going to go back to this shape and let's get the clay tubes going. I kind of like to go over. Of course, I'm making everything perfectly symmetrical right now. Later on, I'll go back and kind of reduce this, you know, add some imperfections so it's not quite so symmetrical. But while I'm just still establishing the basic shapes, I work with symmetry on because it's a huge time saver, basically. The brush that I really like a lot is the clay fill brush. TSK clay fill. It's kind of a very gentle brush and it does a great job because I kind of want to beef this up a little bit without using inflate. Because there's a little bit less space here between this groove and this groove. I think I had too much space there. So this is about 1.3 million. So let's see. I'm going to divide it again, get it up to about 5 million. Kind of just clean this up a little bit. I'll go in here with a good old Damien standard brush and add a little bit of sharper lines. Get some kind of tension going here. You know. I think of the tension in the exoskeleton is not so much like, you know, folds in skin, because obviously an exoskeleton is hard, but at the same time exoskeletons do grow over time, and insects molt. They lose their exoskeleton as they grow bigger, and so it's like it goes up. It depends on the insect, but you have several stages where it will molt and discard its old exoskeleton. The time between each molt is known as an instar. So if you're going to have a birthday party for a bug, you would celebrate, I guess, whenever it has a molt, because that's the end of the instar. And like it depends. Like if you're talking about an ant, you don't really find a whole lot of ant exoskeletons lying around, as opposed to, you know, arachnids, the spiders. molt all the time. There's some cool footage, like time-lapse footage of spiders and molting and that kind of thing. As far as this beetle goes, I have no idea what the story is and how often it molts or when it molts and that kind of thing. Cicadas are another good one to look up online. See some cool videos of emerging from a previous molt. I'm pulling up a video here real quick. A little time lapse of it. It's kind of cool. La da da. Then you give it a little birthday cake when it comes out. Pretty cool. Turn on the solo button and do a quick clay polish here. And let's take a look at some different views here. Do this. I think that we can see there's a bit of a collar right here before it hits the head. So let's sculpt that in here. Let's move this back a little bit so there's a little bit more space. I can fill this in a bit. This line right here is because I have the mask by polygroups, so that's the border of two polygroups there. But it's not really going to be seen, so it doesn't really bother me so much. I'm going to add some of this detail down here on the bottom of the head as well. Probably take some more pictures of this guy. save this. Drink some beer. Okay. Am I from Mozambique? No, but I've been to Mozambique. I went to Mozambique. This is a t-shirt from a bug shot photography workshop that I did back in 2018 that took place in Mozambique. And the t-shirt design is actually by Thomas Shahan. In fact, a lot of the pictures that you see behind me in my studio were pictures that I took while I was there. We went to Gorongosa Park, which is a really beautiful nature preserve, which has a really cool story behind it. Essentially, from what I learned, was that the Gorongosa Park near Mount Gorongosa was a very popular place for safaris back in the 20s. So a lot of rich people from Europe and America would go there and shoot animals and that kind of stuff. Not something that I'm a big fan of. But that's what they did. And at the time, the park was very abundant with wildlife, and it was very popular for that kind of thing. Then, of course, there was a civil war in Mozambique, and basically that devastated the wildlife because, because people were poaching them for food and for money. And just getting some different views in that part. And so the park was devastated, and almost all of the major fauna, the large animals, were killed. Some elephants survived. Some of the elephants there still have bullet holes in their ears and things like that. So it was not great. And then basically, I think the Civil War ended, and around the early 2000s, there was this guy, Greg Carr, who made a lot of money as an entrepreneur in the internet. Looks like this collar goes all the way around here. Let's turn this around. So he made lots and lots of money and wanted to do something worthwhile with his money. So what he did is he started to research various ways that he could use the money he made to sort of benefit the world. Because he's one of these rare billionaires who's actually a nice guy. And he met E.O. Wilson, who's a famous entomologist and a hero of mine. And E.O. Wilson convinced him to help use his money to restore the park in Mozambique. And so that's what the project that they started. And there's some really cool episodes of like Nova and PBS specials, and I think even some Disney stuff on the history of the park, which are worth checking out. But what they did is, rather than just, a bunch of Europeans and white people pouring money into the park, they wanted to make sure that they also invested in the local community around the park, so that the people, because the problem is that people were making their money poaching animals, they were getting their food in the park. And so what they wanted to do was encourage the economy around the park so that there was less poaching. And so a lot of the park rangers are actually locals, and some of them are even ex-poachers who have, now decided to use their skills to help protect the wildlife. And then they've been bringing in animals from other parts of Africa, like South Africa, and basically repopulating the park. And it's been a huge success story. in terms of conservation. And one of the reasons that I like it so much is that it shows that you can actually fix things. If people really want to fix the damage that's been done, you can actually do it if you put your mind and energy to it, and if you plan well. And so they did things like they started a coffee company that grows coffee on Mount Gorongosa, and that's grown, supported by the local population in Mozambique, and so it helped them get some money, and you know, it's starting to come back. So it's a pretty cool story. So I got to go there in 2018 and hang out with a bunch of serious nerds, and we took pictures of the wildlife there. It was really it was like 10 days, a really memorable trip. I hope to go back there at some point. So that was a long ass answer to your question. I've been to, so on that trip in Africa, I went to South Africa, I went to Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Mozambique. I didn't have a chance to go to Madagascar though, which some of the people there, they went on to Madagascar to do another bug shot workshop there, but I didn't get a chance to do it because it was a long trip already. But it was really cool. The cool thing about Gorongosa is it's not like one of these petting zoos. I mean, the wildlife there is it's real wildlife. You're in the freaking jungle. And you know, while you're in the, you know, we're basically in a compound. Let me see if I can find some pictures here real quick. No interesting insects in Egypt? Oh, that's heartbreaking to hear that. I know you got scarab beetles, or you used to at one time, right? Here's some pictures of Gorongosa, and this is what it looks like. It's just absolutely fantastic. There's Mount Gorongosa. This is near the Rift Valley where human beings originated. That's one of the things that's really fascinating about it. And they do have elephants there. The elephants do not like people, so you want to stay the hell away from them as much as possible. They also have lions. Here's like, this is like the compound where we stayed in. And then when you leave the compound, you would go out with the park rangers on trails, looks just like this. And you'd have rangers who would have, you know, shotguns with them just to make sure. And it's kind of funny because, you know, with bug nerds, we all have our cameras out and we're all like looking at the ground, right? And we have our flashes and macro lenses and all that kind of stuff. And some of these people, I'm just like, you all are crazy, because they're like, we have this big like lagoon or pond or whatever you want to call it, and people are just walking up to it. I'm like, I'm not the first one to go there, because there are some serious crocodiles there, and I'll let everybody else go first. We did get to see some lions. I didn't see any elephants while I was there, but I knew they were there because I could hear them, and that was cool. But at night you wander around in the compound and you could look out through the fence and just see glowing eyes. And you know, usually they're like baboons and that kind of stuff, but you don't really know. It's kind of nerve-wracking. Okay, this is something I'm going to have to kind of play with. I think, you know, it's tough because every view is just a little bit different. You get a little bit of different information here. So you have to kind of adjust. I can start to obsess about one area and get a little bit lost in it, but I think that's pretty good. And I think what I need is an image of the top. The problem is the top is so colorful that it's hard to see the details in it. You know, it's like, but here we go. We can see this. You can see that there's kind of a ridge right here and over here. Very, very fuzzy. Super fuzz. So I'm kind of curious, is this a continuation of this that goes all the way around? Kind of looks like it. There we go. Yeah, I think it looks like it. It's just like a big ring that goes all the way around. That's how I'm going to interpret it. If I'm wrong, I'll fix it later. Alright, I lost that image. Where'd it go? Such a happy looking dude. I mean, even though he's dead. Maybe he died happy. Who knows? Trying to find a good image here. I had one a second ago and I lost it. Not that one. This one, right here. Okay, don't let me do that again. I'll take an SK cloth and go over here. Sorry, let me catch up on the questions here. This is a beetle. Cockroaches are in the order of Blatodia. Beetles are in Coleoptera. So not closely related to a cockroach. I mean, you can see it kind of looks like that. I have held a cockroach and I've also sculpted a cockroach. Of course, I went to school in Tallahassee, Florida, and we call them palmetto bugs there, but we know what they are. They're cockroaches. I got some cool cockroach stories if you want to hear them. I don't really get disgusted by insects. I don't like slugs. It depends. Flies, I'm not crazy about. Flies, I have a hard time with, which is too bad because I know some really nice fly scientists who study flies. And flies are incredibly diverse. We always think of just like the typical house fly, but of course there's all kinds of different, it's an extremely diverse order, Diptera. It includes mosquitoes and things like that. Flies, like house flies, those kind of gross me out. A typical like house cockroach, I'm not super fond of because I've had some yucky experiences with them before. So when I lived in Tallahassee, Florida, I wonder if I think I should separate this from the rest of the body. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud here. Because it looks like this is definitely a separate piece here, right? Anyways, I don't know what it does with it, if this thing actually moves or something. That'd be interesting. I don't think so, because, well, hard to say. Anyways, I spent one summer in Tallahassee, Florida, and I worked at a place called Door Products. We made doors. This is like summer work, because there's not a whole lot of work in Tallahassee in the summer. And we repaired doors. And I remember my boss sent me out to go get a metal door from the mall, the food court, from this restaurant called Lucy Ho's. It's a terrible name for a restaurant, but Lucy Ho's in Tallahassee, Florida. So I took his truck and drove to the mall, Governor Square Mall, and went into the back, and the metal door in question led to this back hallway. And so we took the metal door off, and I took it all the way back to the truck, carrying it through the back of the mall, like on the back of my shoulder like this, a big heavy metal door. Put it back in the back of the truck, drove back to the shop, got out of the truck, looked in the back, and the door had these rusty holes in it, and just thousands of cockroaches were just pouring out of the hole there. They had been living inside the door, and I had been carrying the door like this for, quite a ways to put in the back of the truck. So that was pretty gross. I wasn't really crazy about that. And then, of course, lots of other stories of, college life, living in crappy apartments with roaches all over the place, coming out of the walls and stuff. And one time I woke up with a roach, big palmetto bug right on my face. That was pretty gross. But, that's like a typical kind of urban cockroach that you find in a house. There's actually some really cool cockroaches that you find in nature, and actually I found many in Mozambique actually in the wild, and they are not nearly as gross. Some of them are actually very pretty, and in some ways cute. They look like little Pokemons and stuff. It depends. I mean, obviously, if I got really grossed out by bugs, I wouldn't spend so much time sculpting them. But I've sculpted a number of flies, as well. I don't understand people sculpt zombies all day long, because it's like, I can look at reference of bugs and I'm perfectly happy that. But if you're doing like zombies and things, you got to look at like pictures of accident victims and stuff like that. If you're really doing it in a production, you're working on like Walking Dead or something like that, and that's something I'd rather not do. I don't need to have those kinds of nightmares. I mean, I have dreams with bugs. Some of them are nightmares and some of them are actually a lot of fun. Big crazy bugs and end up being my friends or something like that. I don't know. Audio is a little low. Okay, thank you for saying that. I will try and boost it up here. I'm also kind of talking kind of quiet. See if that helps. Thank you for the comment. If it's too loud now, let me know. Let me see. I can also bring up the volume this way. Maybe. I don't know. See if that helps. I think I can get away without making this a separate piece, because I don't think that this is actually an appendage. I don't know, I had to take my sample and see if I can pry it out of there, because I don't, it would be weird to think that this is a separate appendage, but you never know. I mean, you can see that there's a ridge here, right? It's just so fuzzy. And then we have this little protuberance right there. It's kind of weird, kind of symmetrical too. Could probably sculpt in some of this, some of the design here, just as a place marker, so I can see what's going on here. I think my least favorite insect would have to be mosquito. I think that goes without saying. It's kind of funny because I've met a lot of, entomologists, and, typically when you're a scientist and you study these bugs, you tend to develop a fondness for your species. Like, I know people who study phorid flies and they love phorid flies. Obviously people study mantises, are big mantis fans, and butterfly people, lepidopterists, they love it. But people who study mosquitoes, that's the exception. Nobody loves mosquitoes, because mosquitoes are some of the most dangerous animals on the earth, if you think about it in terms of the way they transmit disease and stuff. Let's see, kind of sculpting this here. So I'm not a big fan of mosquitoes, although there's some really pretty mosquitoes. It's just, the species that are dangerous to humans, there's like, 8 or 9 species that carry diseases that are transmitted to humans. Then there's many other species that you don't even think about because they don't bite you, you don't care, they're just mosquitoes, right? And some of them can be really colorful and kind of interesting looking. I mean, there's just the amazing diversity of insects. We usually think typically in a regular day about maybe 10 different insects or whatever. It's kind of funny. I was just in the gym taking a class about an hour or so ago, and they're going around asking, people introducing themselves, and the question tonight was like, what's the last thing you want to see first thing in the morning? And 3 different people said a spider. I'm like, what's with all the spider hate, man? Spiders are awesome. Especially if you don't like bugs, then spiders are your friends, right? Everybody tell me what your favorite and least favorite insect is in the chat. This seems to be like, should be a bit rounder. I have a hard time picking my favorite, but I would say that right now bees are my favorite, among my favorite, specifically the orchid bee. I learned this week, though, something I didn't know, that there's only a few species of bees that actually produce honey. Apis mellifera being the most common one, the one that you guys are probably most familiar with. European honeybee. They're an invasive species, technically. They were brought to America by Europeans, of course. But there's another type of bee that makes honey that actually, honeybees, Apis mellifera, are vegetarians, so they feed off of, plants, right? They eat nectar from plants and that kind of thing. But there is a carnivorous bee that also makes honey, and technically, honey is regurgitated by the bee, produces the honey to feed the hive and the larvae and all that kind of stuff. So this particular bee, carnivorous bee that eats decaying flesh, is making honey out of rotted meat. So pretty gross. I didn't know that such a thing existed, but somebody sent me a link. My friend Martin Hall sent me a link on Instagram to the story. It's pretty gross. There's a wasp that makes honey. It's a Mexican honey wasp. I modeled one of those a long time ago. My model probably needs to be updated. I think I've gone overboard on this a little bit. The honey made from decaying flesh, I don't want to find out if it's sweet. Probably. It's probably gross. Yeah, dragonflies, of course, are really fantastic. Spiders are arachnids. So you basically have, in arthropods, you have several main orders. You have the three main types of arthropods. Arthropods are basically segmented animals with exoskeletons, right? So you have invertebrates, arthropods, and then for arthropods you have crustacea, arachnids, and insects, roughly speaking. I think there's a couple sort of other categories that are lesser known things in there, but spiders are arachnids, so they're in the same category as scorpions and tailless whip scorpions and that kind of thing. And arachnids I'm a big fan of as well. Crustaceans would be, of course, things like lobsters and crabs and crayfish and that kind of thing. And then there's insects. All insects fall under hexapoda, so they're all six-legged with a segmented body divided into head, thorax. Sometimes, like in the case of the beetles, you have the thorax in two separate parts, thorax and a mesothorax. So I'm sculpting the mesothorax right now. And then the abdomen. The first insects were a lot like dragonflies, Meganeura. So dragonflies are kind of like the oldest type of insect. Yeah, we do have stingless bees here in North America, a lot of them. I think carpenter bees are stingless bees. I started a carpenter bee model last year, and I got to get back to it. I think when I finish this project, this beetle project, I'm going to do a bee next, or get back to the bee models that I was working on. I have a lot of cool books on bees. Carpenter bees are really cool. The males look totally different from the females. The males are bright yellow, and the females are larger and black. Usually people mistake them for bumblebees. They're not really bumblebees. I forget what makes a bumblebee, but they're like solitary bees. I like ants a lot because ants are really cool. Don't necessarily want them in my house too much, but they are very cool to study. It's funny because I go to these workshops, these bug shop workshops. It gets very cliquey, you know, the people hang out. Yeah, the bee people and the spider people, and everybody makes fun of the butterfly people. Because butterflies are too easy to love, you know what I mean? They're just, you know, they look pretty. They're kind of show-offs. It's kind of why I like moths. Nothing pisses off a butterfly person more than talking about moths. And like, yeah, there are no, really, there's no such thing as butterflies. There's only day moths. The difference between moths and butterflies, I forget, but you can usually find a list online. If they really are that different, they're pretty darn similar. So this, I think it's like, I want to make sure I'm not confusing this ridge of fur for an actual structure here. I'm going to fill this in a little bit too. I think I went overboard with that. The old clay fill here. I mean, you can see a division here, so I don't want to lose it entirely, but let's do this. Can insects become homosexual? Oh man, that's a really great question. Well, it's tough to answer that because insects, of course, have, you know, because the problem is that there's such a massive diversity in the way that insects reproduce. There's definitely asexual insects, and insects can become asexual, or, you know, there are species of wasp that are entirely female, and they reproduce via parthenogenesis. I don't think insects really, you know, well, that's a really good question. But I also know that, okay, so you have a species of like typically stag beetles, and these beetles with these long, crazy horns and this kind of stuff. And they do a lot of jousting and that kind of stuff. They're competing for females, right? And this is a story that I'm getting from a book, Insect Weaponry. I forget. I'll bring up the name of the book in a moment. But so you have these larger males, and they joust, and they're vying for territory so that they can mate with a female, right? And so while they're fighting and everything, you'll have another male beetle that is smaller and has evolved to look more like a female. So it's disguising itself as a female, so that the males are kind of ignoring that one, and it will sneak in while the big males are fighting. It will burrow down and basically mate with the female while the other larger males are jousting with each other. That's not really, you know, that's just kind of like, you know, I wouldn't call that necessarily homosexuality. It's just a different, you know, sexuality in the reality of biology is incredibly complex, and I hate to say it for those who want to insist that there are only two genders. I'm sorry, but it's much more complicated than that. You know, think of Jurassic Park, and you know, life finds a way, basically. You know, it's like male ants are pretty useless. They have basically one function, and that is basically to mate with a virgin queen, and they tend to be haploid. In other words, they have half the chromosomes of the female, because male ants come from unfertilized eggs. So they're pretty stupid. And they basically emerge from the eggs, and they're the ones with the wings. And their only mission in life is to mate with a female. That's the thing that drives me crazy about Ant-Man, because he's flying around on these winged ants, which are most likely the male ants, because you know there's going to be basically one queen per colony. So they're pretty hard to control. I mean, if a virgin queen flew by while Ant-Man was trying to fly the male ant somewhere, Ant-Man would be out of luck, because the male would just go off and do its thing. Sorry, Ant-Man. Okay, I'm going to leave that there because I'm obsessing about it a little bit too much. I think I need to tighten this up a little bit. Get out the old the dreaded pinch brush. And lower the Z intensity. Yeah, I'll do the hair usually, like, for something that's this hairy. I mentioned this last week. I would do probably use like Yeti or X-Gen or something like that. I'm a big fan of Yeti, which I talked about last week. You know, I could also try doing fiber mesh. Maybe I find fiber mesh a little bit difficult to control. It's not my favorite, but I do like Yeti. This is like really interesting. It's like this little. Yeah, it is. It takes us a bit of practice to start to really try and see the forms underneath all the hair, and a lot of times you just have to accept the fact that as you're modeling it, you're probably going to go back and change things as you start to really understand it. You know, it's one of these things where it takes a while to really understand or see the forms. You know, we don't have the benefit of, like, you have so much knowledge about the human anatomy just from your own experience, in addition to everything that you see in books and training materials and everything. Insects, not so much. It's a bit harder. So I'll probably end up going out back and changing things as I kind of realize what I'm mistaking for hair. Like, this almost looks like a structure, and we do have this little structure here. I'm not even sure what that is. It's like little nodules. It's very cool, but it's like buried into the hair there, so it's kind of hard to see. But I kind of enjoy the challenge, you know, so for me that's the fun of it. Yeah, it's like, what is going on there? This looks like, you know, so I have this big gap here between the elytra, which is this part, and this part, and it looks like there's like a band here of a structure of some sort, and it's got these little weird knobbly deals on it. Knobblies. It's wild. So maybe what I need to do is build that out a little bit. You know, I also think I've lost some symmetry here. It's okay. Let's take a look at this so far. It looks pretty cool. I do rigging. I wouldn't say I have my own system of rigging, what works for me when I like to animate things. But I'm not going to profess to be great at rigging. I know people that do nothing but rigging, and of course that's a whole different ball of wax. But what I like about rigging insects is that you don't have to worry about all the freaking blend shapes and skin weighting and all the stuff that you have to do with humans, which is much more difficult because the exoskeleton doesn't necessarily deform the way that skin does, so you can get away with just rigging, you know, one joint per leg segment, and that's pretty cool. It makes my life a lot easier. what I'm hoping to do when I get a chance is I do some Udemy stuff on Udemy tutorials on insect rigging and animation and that kind of stuff, because I really do love animating insects as well. It's just a matter of finding the time to get all these things done. I have several Udemy tutorials available now if you guys are curious. They're all ZBrush related. Let's see what's going on here. This is really interesting. I mean, you got this thing and then this thing down here. This is pretty typical of beetles. When you have a beetle elytra, which is the outside wing right here, the other wings are the inside, you usually have this, and I forget the name of the structure, this kind of thing in some form on a lot of beetles. But this right here, this seems to be kind of more specific to this type of beetle. Let's widen it out here a little bit. And then I'm gonna build this up. Yeah, I know. I could probably find some kind of agent to dissolve the fur or something like that. The tricky part is working with scan data on insects. This insect was built from scratch using Z-spheres, but I also do a lot of stuff with scan data, and of course that's tricky because you get all the fur. You know, if you're doing like a bee or something like that, that could be hard because the fur can really get in the way of the rest of the structures. But bees are very hard because, especially honeybees, because you really have to try and see the bee without the fur while you're sculpting it, and it looks very different. I mean, it's, you know, it's like looking at a shaved bear or something like that. You know, it's going to look really different from pictures of bears that you see online because they're so fuzzy. And then it looks like this has I don't want to lose that shape there, but should see more of this kind of thing. Let's save this. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll take these parts up to a certain level and then kind of move on to another part just so that I can get some perspective on other parts of the insect and how they fit together. Because if I spend too much time on one part, I start to get a little obsessed with it, and it gets wonky. Let's see how we're doing so far. That's looking pretty cool, though. It's looking better than when we started today. It's getting there. I'm really looking forward to when I do the poly painting. That's gonna be fun. I like the negative space here between this and this and this is very interesting. Let's make sure that I have kind of the same thing going here. So what I might do is this, I think I can pull back a little bit. Now I have space for these little jobbies. I mean, it's really wild. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, who knows what those are even for, if they're for anything. Just complete mystery detail. I think one thing you learn from insects is that, you know, form follows function, and then every once in a while there's just something crazy in there that you can't figure out. I mean, even if you find somebody who specializes in beetles, there's 400,000 species, known species of beetles, so it's a lot to learn. They could be very different, you know. Firefly is a type of beetle, ladybug is a beetle, tiger beetles are very different. One of these days I gotta do with those big, what do you call them? Big green jobbies that fly around. Fig beetles. Those things are really cool. They're really cool. Of course, they, you know, they're loud and they hit you in the head, and people freak out when they see them, even though they're completely and utterly harmless. I'll stick to this one. I mean, these things look like they would be eyes or something. They're not, though. I don't know what they are. just kind of block these in roughly right now. I'll probably go back and refine that a bit later. Let's pull out some of the geometry here. And I'll probably have to do another ZBrush here to, I'm going to start fighting against the grain. That's not too bad, but kind of wild. Well, everybody goes through their bug phase. Yeah, there are definitely parasites that live on beetles. The other thing that's interesting about beetles is you have wasps are also incredibly diverse, and you have parasitoid wasp. A parasitoid is not quite a parasite, because a parasite doesn't kill the host, but parasitoid does. So a good example of a parasitoid organism, xenomorph from Alien, right? Egg sticks the thing in the chest burster comes out, kills the victim, or in some cases keeps them sort of in a quasi-alive state. And it comes out and becomes a xenomorph, and you got your movie, right? There's your movie. Well, that whole life cycle, of course, is taken from wasps. A good example is a tarantula hawk wasp. So a tarantula hawk wasp will paralyze a tarantula, lay its eggs in the tarantula. The tarantula is still alive, it just can't move. It drags the tarantula back to its nest. Little wasp larvae grow inside the tarantula and burst out, and bye-bye tarantula, and then you have baby wasps, right? So you also have parasitoid wasps that will live off of beetles and do similar things to beetles. And so entomologists are discussing recently that they think that there is a different species of parasitoid wasp for every species of beetle, which means there would be somewhere around 400,000 species of parasitoid wasp. And of course there's non-parasitoid wasps and social wasps and that kind of thing. So it would make wasps one of the most diverse insect orders out there. But there's also so when you pulled legs off of beetles, you probably saw some kind of mite or maybe even wasp larvae, who knows, There's also ant decapitating flies, which are really cool. There's basically phorid flies, and what they do is they're very, very tiny, and what they do is they fly around. You see this on leafcutter ants and that kind of thing, and the phorid fly will actually inject its eggs in between the plates on an ant's abdomen, which is a very small space. It's an ant, right? And it will lay the eggs there, and the eggs of the ant will go out doing her job and everything, being an ant, and the egg will grow and migrate from the abdomen all the way through the thorax, all the way up into the head, where it will start to grow and eventually grow so big, and the ant is still doing its job and living and everything, but eventually, of course, the ant's going to die because its brain has been completely eaten. Maybe this is what was happening in RFK, I don't know. But anyways, the ant's head will pop off, and the fly will emerge from the neck hole in the ant. And you'll actually see the little ant head walking around by itself because the fly is trying to get out of it. And if you look at, let me see if we can find, leaf. Some images here. Here's a good one. So you see how there you have a larger leafcutter ant here, and it's carrying the leaf back to the nest, and then you have these smaller ants right here. These smaller ants are in the process of defending this ant from the flies. So these guys are just like on the lookout and, you know, waving their antennae around and trying to get rid of the fly so the fly doesn't attack this leafcutter ant, which is kind of wild. So yeah, so what I just did a Google search for a leafcutter ant defending against flies, and you see all these images here. It's pretty cool. Wild stuff. Leafcutters are some of my favorite ants. They're just so cool looking. I did a model of a leafcutter way back, Acromyrmex. Yeah, this is really cool. They're also very diverse because a single colony of leafcutter ants, you'll have, this is this larger worker, but these are also from the same colony and they're smaller and they all have different jobs. So, you know, they're, oh wow, look at that. There's a queen. I'm guessing that's a queen. Probably not a male. It's got to be a queen. Pretty cool. Anyways. Ants are cool. You name some of the most beautiful and least disgusting insects in your opinion. I would say that orchid bee is my absolute favorite. I just think they're amazing looking. We can get some good images here. There's so many species of bees that are just absolutely beautiful. You know, they're very iridescent. I love their faces. There's lots of different bees are very pretty. Obviously mantis, you know, orchid mantis is, anything dealing with orchids tends to be really beautiful. And you know, these guys, really amazing. And if you want to know how to model an orchid bee or an orchid mantis, I have a Gnomon series on it. You can check out. Give me a chance to plug my stuff. Hold on a second, I'll bring it up. Yeah, it's here on the Gnomon Workshop. I have a whole series on modeling this orchid mantis in ZBrush, and then it's rendering in Marmoset. But I do all the poly painting and the coloring here in ZBrush, so you can check that out. And then I also have one on jumping spiders using Yeti, so the jumping spider series. And then also this is an earlier one that I did on wasp, and I think that one's rendered in Octane. But it has a lot of stuff on insect anatomy and other things that you can check out. You know, beetles are some of the most beautiful insects. You know, just look at beautiful beetles, and look at this. I mean, they're fantastic. There's a Phanius vindex, one of my favorites. I've done a model of that one. Yeah, I mean, these are really pretty. It's hard to say because I'm biased, because I think, you know, most insects are really beautiful. Here's a great one. This like, looks like solid gold, you know. That one's really cool. Okay, so this one, let's work on the elytra a little bit here. And this one, I believe, is still in a state of, yeah, it's in a state of Dynamesh. So let's first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do Control W to put it all in polygroup. And so I'm going to Z remesh this guy. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. I'm going to do mask pen. So I'm going to Z remesh this sucker, and then so I can start sculpting more detail on it. So I'm going to first start by just very quickly making some polygroups. So painting a mask, and then hitting Control W to turn the mask into a polygroup. I'll do the bottom here. Actually, for this, I'm just going to go in here, and we can use the old slice brush, slice curve, to quickly make a polygroup. Whoops. Let's do. Let's do this real quick. Modify topology. Let's do mirror and weld. So it's symmetrical. Make sure we have perspective off. That's the problem. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to do Control click on this and Control W, so that's all one polygroup. Let's see, that should probably good. You know, I'm going to turn off symmetry for a second here, and there we go. Keep this all one piece for now. So go down here to Z remesh, and I'm going to do adaptive. Right now it's 61,000, so let's set this to, you know, like let's do 50,000. Adaptive, keep groups. Let's save this real quick. It's always a good idea to save before you do something like this. And Z remesh. I forgot to turn symmetry back on. Oh well, it's okay. Let me undo that real quick. I do want this to be symmetrical. Hopefully it won't destroy my polygroups. It might. Yeah, it kind of did. That's okay. Another thing I want to do is go back in time here and Control click on that, so I have that history state stored. Let's get it down to that's 3,000. Let's see. Z remesh limbo. Let's do same, because I think 1700 is fine. Yeah, that's probably good. I lose symmetry on here. I don't like those triangles. Let's do this. That's probably good enough. I didn't like those triangles, so I'm going to keep it like this. And let's subdivide it. Looks like a little pillow. And go in here and do subtool, project history. Let's get it up to a few million. 1.755 million is fine. Yeah, sorry, I meant to turn on adaptive. Or let's see. That's pretty good. I'd say that's good enough for now. This has kind of gotten a little bit weird, but that's okay. Something like this. This doesn't need to be that thick, but I'm not gonna, I think for this model, I'm not gonna do the wings underneath it. I'm gonna keep this kind of like this. So I don't really care about this geometry. I might get rid of it later, I might change my mind on it. But right now, I think it's fine, just for this stage. Oops. I suppose I could just use the pinch brush. Everyone hates the pinch brush. Let's save this real quick. It's looking pretty cool. Let's get there. I'm going to do a few more minutes and then call it a night. Unfortunately, I have to do some work tonight, so I'm not going to be able to do the full 2 hours. So just kind of look at this. I mean, this is like crazy town. What is going on there, man? In some pictures they look like holes, and other they look like little cherries stuck in there. I mean, that's just wild. Yeah, see here they look like little holes because it's kind of blurry and out of focus. But in this one, they're very clearly like weird little blobbities. And look at this. This is the kind of stuff that I love. So I can't get enough of this kind of detail. It's just so weird and wacky. And what a great inspiration for creature design, you know? This is like when you're, you know, when I design my own creatures and that kind of stuff, one of the things that I've picked up from modeling insects is, you know, you kind of, you make rules and try and follow them, not super strictly, but what I mean by rules is, you know, a rule would be wherever you make one of these large spheres, make a little angular part coming out like this. So you have this kind of pattern, but you can see it's a little bit different for each and every one. Here without the hair, you can see a little bit more of what's going on. But for every one of these little red jobbies, you get this little protrusion right here. So it's kind of looking like it's embedded in there. And there's like, you use motifs like that, they can add a lot of like a cool character to your sculpture. And you can see that some of them, you know, it carries over into other parts, but not, you know, not super strictly. It's not like overall everywhere on the body you find this detail. It's only right here on this top part of the elytra. But you find similar details on other parts. I mean, this is similar in the fact that it's like little roundish bumps, evenly spaced. And then this, we have these little bumps. And then we, of course, we have these guys that show up right here. It's really interesting. Very cool. So we can kind of use this pattern. And again, I'm probably going to make this like very symmetrical at first and then go back later and make it less symmetrical, just as an effort to save some time. But we can use this, start at least blocking in some of this pattern here just as a guide. I also have, oops, that's the underside of the beetle. Interesting that you assume that I use Blender. Actually, I still use Maya. I'm kind of transitioning into Blender, but I've been using Maya since 1998, so it's kind of like, it's going to take me a while to transition. And a lot of my clients still use Maya as well. I do use ZSphere for posing, and like if it's something like I just want to make a cool image, a render out of ZBrush, not necessarily something I want to animate, then I might use a ZSphere rig just to do the posing. With insects, of course, you know, since it's not deforming as much, you don't necessarily have to do it. But, you know, this model started out as Z-spheres, you know, if you go back and watch the earlier live streams, and same with the wasp that I created before, and the project I did before this one. So yeah, I mean, I use Z-spheres to do quick rigs all the time, and it works pretty well, you know, for just quick posing. But if it's like a full project that I plan to animate, I usually do a quick rig in my own type of rig in Maya. and then I'll animate based on that. Yeah, some of us old folks are still using Maya. You know, like I was saying last week, Maya's alright. I don't have a particular love for it. It's okay. Back in the day, I think it used to be a really awesome program, but I don't know. I don't feel like Autodesk has done that much to it to improve it. That's just my opinion, man. Look at these weird, like, tiki designs. It's totally cool, man. I'm just kind of blocking this in right now. This is not necessarily meant to be sculpted detail. I'm just kind of like putting landmarks so I don't get lost on here. I need to picture the full back here. Yeah, probably. Let me go back a little bit. What I should do is what I'll do is I'll bring this image, or bring an image into the background, the floor, and then use that as a guide, because otherwise I'm going to keep redoing this thing, but we'll see. Okay. Yeah, I know there's some, they built in some cool posing things into the gizmo. And that's always a cool way. You know, that's the nice thing about doing insects, since they're segmented, it's a little bit easier to, yeah, they've added a little bit of softening here, and let me see. Of course, that's on that one segment. You know, that kind of stuff. So it's easier to pose now, especially with insects and that kind of thing. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there for tonight, and then next Thursday, 7:30 to 9:30, I'll continue with this, and I'll work on the elytra, and I'll bring in some better reference so that I'm not just making this stuff up and project it on there so I can get more accurate. But this looks pretty good for, you know, one night's, or, you know, an hour and a half worth of work, just kind of sculpting and yammering at the same time. It's starting to look pretty cool, looking like a beetle. Ways to go, but it's pretty neat. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week, and I hope you get inspired to learn some more about bugs. Remember, books. If you go into YouTube and, you know, Maxon ZBrush page, they have all the older live streams available up there. Not just me, but all the wonderful live streamers, Ashley Adams and Michael Pavlovich and Ian Robinson and all the other great ones. Let me see again. I'll just pull it up real quick. Yeah, if you go here, right here, you'll see the older live streams. Look under live, and these are the older live streams. So you can see the ones that I did in previous weeks, as well as some other wonderful artists. I don't know how far back they go, but I think they go pretty far back. So if you look up under my name, Eric Keller, I think you'll see all of these. So check it out. Also check out my Gnomon workshop, and one last quick plug. I have some courses on Udemy. Course on demystifying ZBrush materials. Goes over standard materials, MatCap materials, Redshift materials, all the settings. And then it's ZBrush for jewelry designers. This is a fundamentals. It goes over all the basics of ZBrush if you're new to ZBrush. And then I have another one on understanding ZBrush geometry. Talks about the difference between Dynamesh and subdivision surfaces, nanomesh, and all the different types of meshes. Take a look at the chapters. Yeah, you can see I have a chapter for each different type of mesh here. And then also some pro tips for little short chapters. So there's a lot of chapters there. Check that out. And then my website is looptone.com. And you can see my portfolio, jewelry design, and more information on my CG Instructed. So thanks again, and I will talk to you soon. See you next week. Have a good week. Be nice to bugs.